All right, we're back. So let's get into the Proper IV tool on page 25. Now, Proper IV is going to form the basis for everything that you do. It's going to be the foundational tool that you use that seeps into every other tool. And it's really going to help you frame your coaching conversations in a way that is going to, one, never leave you without a response for the people that you're coaching. And I'm sure many of you know what that feels like. Someone shares something and you're not sure what to say. You'll never be in that situation again with Proper IV. Number two, Proper IV helps build trust. It helps build rapport. It helps build client motivation to change. Like, it does a lot, okay? There's stuff in here from motivational interviewing, stuff from the recovery community, and from some other therapeutic modalities. They're all blended into this Proper IV tool. Now, it's going to feel at first like a lot to remember, and I always make the analogy of like when you first learn to drive a car. There's the steering wheel, there's the blinker, there's the windshield wipers, there's the brake, the gas, maybe the stick shift. There's all the different lights on your dashboard. There's your speed. There's looking out for other cars, looking at the traffic lights, the road signs, the condition of the road. Like, there's a lot that's going on. But once you've been driving for a while, as probably most of us know, you get in the car and you just go. You don't even think about it. You can have a conversation and sip a coffee at the same time as you're messing with the radio and doing all that other stuff. That's how it is with the Proper IV tool. At first, you're very self-conscious. You may stall out a couple times, but eventually you will get the hang of it and you'll be doing it without even thinking about it. So just trust the process. It takes some practice, but you will get there. Okay. So, why Proper IV? Well, as I explained there on page 25, an IV is short for intravenous. And in a medical setting, you would use this. An IV is it's that tube that brings the nutrients or the medicine right to where it needs to go on the person to help them as quickly as possible. And that's what we're doing with Proper IV. We're getting the medicine where it needs to go relationally through the conversation, the coaching conversation that we're having. So what does it stand for, Proper IV? Well, it stands for process comments. If you go to page 26, process comments, reflections, open questions, prayer, encouragement, requests, information, and validation. And so these are it's kind of like a menu of responses that you have, so that when your client shares information, you have a response that is going to be helpful. It's like a vetted list of responses that can't help but make the conversation go well. Okay, so we're going to go through them kind of one at a time and just learn what they are. And when it comes time for your in-person session that you're doing virtually with your course facilitator, you can always ask questions and ask for clarifications, but this will give you the basics. And of course, you have the book that can walk you through each step in more detail with examples along the way of what each of these comments might look like in context. So definitely make use of all of that. All right. The first one we're going to look at is process comments. Now, I already taught a little bit about process comments a couple sessions ago here, but just to reiterate, process comments point out what's happening between you and the client in the present moment. Okay, so usually the content of the session is going to be about stuff that's happening outside of the coaching room. But in process, you're talking about stuff that's happening between the two of you right now. It intensifies the conversation and it takes you to a deeper level. And it's very powerful to use in that regard. So some examples of process comments there. It looks like there's some emotion coming up for you when I ask about your boss. So that's you like watching your client and knowing how your client reacts to things. If you have a client who's fair-skinned, often fair-skinned people, when they get emotional or upset, like their skin will change tones like in a really noticeable way. So they'll become a little bit of redness that comes into their face, and you can just see it really easily. It's like there may as well be a big flashing arrow that says, emotional response. So you can call that out. Like, it looks like there's some emotion coming up or sometimes you have clients who cry a lot, and their eyes will start to well up a bit. Or maybe you have a client who gets really visibly excited about certain topics. And so you can call out, I noticed as we talked about that, often when you're helping people discover, they have to choose between options, they'll tell you one option, and it's kind of like they're just talking about it, and they don't seem that excited, and their body language shows it, and their tone of voice shows it. And then they talk about the other option, and they kind of perk up a little bit, and you notice that. And so you might call it out and say, geez, I noticed that when you talked about option B, you really perked up. But when you talked about the option A, you seemed to really not care that much. And actually, you made a number of facial expressions that indicate that's kind of distasteful to you. So you can call that stuff out. That's a process comment, right? Next example, you seem upset when I bring up the topic of forgiveness. You look excited as you envision what your future might look like. I just kind of touched on that. I'm noticing that you're clenching your fists as you speak about your career. It could be you call out that they're tapping their foot. It could be that they're looking down a lot. It could be any number of things that you're noticing as they're sharing. But those are process comments, and they're very powerful, and they're a great thing to add to your collection of possible responses in a coaching conversation. We'll do one more in this video, and that is reflection. So reflections are extremely helpful and versatile. Some coaching misspoke there. Some coaching courses, the only thing that they teach you is to ask open questions, and they talk about powerful questions, and questions are powerful. But there's a lot of other different kinds of responses that you can use that help your client to process and to resolve things in order to move forward. And reflections are one of those. Like with Proper IV, you have all of these different options on how to respond to your clients. Not just question. With Proper IV, it's going to feel more like a conversation with a really close, trusted ally, rather than just an interrogation with a police officer or something like that. Nothing against police officers, love them, work with them all the time. So, reflections. They're one of the options that you have, and there's a bunch of different kinds of reflections that you can do, and I'm going to just touch on a few of them here. So one kind of reflection is just a simple reflection. You're just paraphrasing back what your client said. I used the example in the past. I went to the store today. Oh, you went to the store today. That's a simple reflection, or a basic reflection, whatever you want to call it. Okay. I think I actually have a basic reflection example there on the top page 27. Client says, I was thinking it's about time to make a change. Life Care says, you're ready to make a change in life. Client says, I am. I just think it's time. So the reflection, what the reflection does is it communicates, I've heard you, I understand you, and now you can tell me the next thing. That's what a reflection does. That's its utility. So the next kind of reflection is paraphrasing. So this is where you will take, let's say that your client comes in and says, oh, it's been a crazy week. And then they kind of walk you through the week, and it takes 10 minutes. Okay. So again, this is the beauty of Proper IV is you don't have to know what to say or come up with some clever response. You can just paraphrase back what you heard, but you're doing it in light of what the client's goals are. So let's say that their goal is to not lash out in anger so much to people at work, say. Well, they tell you a story about how their week at work went, and then you paraphrase back, not the whole 10 minutes, word for word, but you're highlighting the key parts of their week that pertain to the goal that they have for coaching. So, Monday you did really great. sounds like, your boss was kind of a jerk, but you didn't blow up at him. Instead, you handled it in a way that you wanted to handle it, and that felt really good. But then on Tuesday, your boss started in on you again, and you blew up, and you almost got fired. But then you fixed it by Friday, and you're not having to worry about getting fired anymore, and you're glad for that. But you're worried that something like this could happen again. Am I getting that right? So there you just took a 10-minute long story, say, and boiled it down to just like a 30-second paraphrase. And the client will say, yeah, that's right. And now here's the next thing. Okay? So again, with the reflection, you're signaling, I heard you. And if you notice there in that paraphrase, I took the energy that they brought into the conversation and I steered it in a particular way towards their goals, towards the things that they're working on, so that I could kind of keep the train on the tracks, but still also guard that rapport that I have with the client by not disregarding their story, but just by capturing the salient points and bringing it back to them for further comment. Okay, so that's paraphrasing. And I have some other examples there, but I won't go through every one. You can read those on your own. Okay. Another type of reflection that you can use is mirroring back unstated feelings or meanings. That's right there, just the kind of 1, 2, 3 paragraphs up from the bottom on page 27. So this is where you're giving your client words to say something that they feel or that they mean, but they haven't quite articulated it yet. Okay, so here's an example. I will read this one. The client says, I like my job, but sometimes I get bored. And the life care coach says, there's a part of you that's unfulfilled in your career. Now, the client didn't say that, okay? They didn't say that. But by sort of synthesizing what they mean or feel or just taking a guess at it, you're giving them words. And so the client says, yes, that's true. There are a lot of times when it just isn't exciting to me. Maybe I need something more or different for life to feel more complete. Now they just went from I like my job, but sometimes I get bored, to talking about making a major life shift based on, the springboard for that conversation was the coach stating something, putting something into words that the client hadn't quite been able to put into words for themselves. Okay, now again, you're taking a guess when you do that, and so sometimes you'll get it wrong, and if you do get it wrong, that's okay. You've taken a shot at it. And a lot of people grow up or live in a situation where somebody does something wrong and they're not willing to admit it, and that can be very frustrating and invalidating. And so if you get it wrong, just say, it sounds like I got that wrong. Tell me how you really do feel. Tell me what you really do mean. And so I've got an example of this on the top of page 28. The life care is noticing that the client's eyes are welling up, and they say, on page 27 at the bottom is where it starts. The client tearing up, I have to leave town today. The coach noticing the client's eyes well up, you haven't said this, but it looks like you're feeling sad about leaving. The client says, no, not really. The life care says, it sounds like I got that wrong. Can you put some words to what you're feeling? And the client says, I just found out that my mother is very sick. Okay, so the coach totally got it wrong, but that's okay, because the coach acknowledged that and then allowed the client to correct them. And that in and of itself is a rapport building exercise. You've taught the client, if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. I don't have so much pride or so much ego that I can't admit when I'm wrong. That's also modeling for the client, that they can admit when they're wrong. So there's nothing wrong with getting it wrong. There's more information there under reflection, and I trust you to read through that. But you've got the basic reflection, you've got paraphrasing, and you've got taking a guess at unstated feeling or meaning. Those are 3 different kinds of reflections that you can use with your client. So really, I always tell coaches, when in doubt, reflect. No matter what your client has shared, When in doubt, you don't know what to say next, just reflect what they've said. Sometimes I get to a place with clients where, like, we've covered a lot of ground, we've done a lot of sessions, and it's like, well, where do we go next? Is there more to work on? So I'll say, okay, let me just see if I can kind of sum up what we've touched on so far. So you came in working with this problem. That was a couple months ago. And then we did some work on that, and then this came up, and this came up, and here's what we did. We did some cognitive behavioral stuff for that. We did some motivational interviewing stuff for that. And now where we are is this, this, and this. Am I getting that right? So that's just a long paraphrase of all the stuff that they've worked on in coaching so far. And then, and I might say after that, what more is there for us to cover? You always want the client to lead. Here's a rule of thumb for you at the end of this, somewhat longish session here. Never work harder than your client. It's their work to do. You put the motivation needs to be coming from them. If you could do the work for them, you would, but you can't. There's no way for you to do it for them. It has to be something they're invested in, has to be something they're motivated to do if the change is going to happen. So always keep putting it back on them to determine the course of your coaching sessions, or at least the goals of it, and then you can bring alongside tools and other things that can help them get there. Okay, so that's enough for this one. We'll see you in the next one where we pick up with Proper IV at open-ended questions. See you then.